Dee Forbes, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's been 3 weeks since you announced your plan for the future of RTE. How do you feel it's being received?
Okay, I suppose first of all, let's go back a little bit. RTE submitted a plan a couple of years ago. We're obliged under our regulations to do a plan every 5 years to lay out what the future is going to be for the organisation. So we did that, submitted to the BAI, our regulator, and to the government. And that was a plan that was very much based on an RTE should funding come to where it should be. It's been much talked about that the funding levels have been reduced significantly. That received very little feedback, in fact no feedback from government until August of this year. And it prompted the BAI to come out and say very categorically that RTE needed an extra 30 million in funding. However, nothing was happening, almost 2 years down the line. So we had to go back to the drawing board, if you like, and say, okay, things have moved on radically, even since we submitted the strategy. So we began to work earlier on this year on a revised strategy. So to take the basis of what we had done, which was really positioning RTE very much for a digital future, and revise that. And that's what we presented 3 weeks ago. Let's be honest, it had a difficult birth. It leaked to the press, so we were on the back foot from day one. So really we've been spending the last 3 weeks talking to staff, talking to stakeholders about what it really means. It's complex, there's a lot to digest. And also I think it's important to say that, it's a plan that is based on a number of things. But number one, I suppose the ultimate premise is that it's there to secure an RTE for the future. That's why we all go to work every day, to ensure that there will be an RTE. But to have an RTE for the future, it has to be a different RTE. And in the current climate, the media is going through such change and such turbulence that we have had to, take a refreshed approach, I suppose, to everything we had done and say, okay, given the climate, given that funding has not been where it has been, given revenue has been falling, given audience shifts, where is this going to go? So we have been spending a lot of time with our staff, with our stakeholders, explaining all of this. And we will continue to do that because there's a lot to talk about. And, RTE is it's a complex organisation. We have radio, we have television, we have online. And I think the important thing now is that we get on with it, because the most important thing in all of this, Dion, is that public service broadcasting needs to be secured for the future. We are a proud nation. We're a proud nation of storytellers, of creatives, of writers. And we're inquisitive as a country. And, RTE provides that public square where the nation can come together, discuss, debate, and all of that. So that really is what's at stake here. That's what we have to nurture. That's what we have to, I suppose, strive to make sure is strong. And it's against backdrop of all of that we've put this plan together.
But why, when you lay out a vision of what RTE should represent there, and you talk about how important it is, it's hard to disagree with it as a concept. But why then do you feel that, you mentioned, a couple of years ago there was no take-up from government. Why isn't there an appetite from the government, do you feel, not to secure something which should be so central in Irish life?
Again, I suppose if you go back to the foundation of RTE, it was set up as a dual-funded model. So we're too small a country to have it one way or the other. So we're roughly 50% licence fee public money and 50% advertising. And that has been manageable, and it worked pretty well for many, many years. However, I think with the change in dynamics of the industry, both of those revenue streams have been very, very unstable. And I think as well that, hard decisions have to be taken, and sometimes people don't like to make hard decisions. And I think what we have been doing for the last number of years is engaging with government on the importance of securing the future. And I think
but are they engaging with you on that?
Yeah, they are engaging. And I think again, if you listen and you hear what was said in the last number of weeks, and even back to August when the minister came out and said what his plans were for the future, he said that it was absolutely vital that we have a public service media. It was vital for democracy, for our people. I think, the diagnosis that he produced on that day was the right one. The remedy to sort of fix it was not, because the 7 years down the road is just too long. So, we are engaged with them. We're having, a lot of dialogue. And again, I think it's about just recognising that, first of all, there's a system in place which, was it working and functioning properly, would be generating an extra 50 million of income into, public service media. And important to say there as well that is not just about RTE. A segment of that money goes to the BAI Sound and Vision Fund, which produces independent content for this country. And, this as well for us is about really securing a future for the creative industries, because without a strong creative industry, who are we? What are we? And I think that's the other piece here. So there is engagement. We are having discussions, and they will be ongoing.
You talked about the difficult birth for this strategy, which is here. That leak caused a lot of anger. Moya Doherty said there's a very small number of people who had access to that document, so it shouldn't be too hard to ask the hard questions about how it leaked. Have you established that? Have you tried to establish that?
I think when something like this happens, it's going to provoke huge anger. I was angry. My team were angry. All the staff were angry. And, I think, I doubt we'll ever know how it happened, to be honest with you. We've made some checks in our systems, etc., just to make sure everything is tight and secure. I think now it's about the implementation. It's about, coming together and recognising that we have a lot to do. We have a very, very important role to play in Irish life, in Irish society, and we have an important obligation to ensure that we, as the sort of custodians of public service broadcasting, ensure there is a future. So I am very much focused, as are the staff, to be fair, now on getting on with it. And yes, it was hard, and yes, people are angry, but it's also, I think it's a difficult time in the industry, and I think there is a period where people need to understand that as well, and to recognise that what's happening globally is happening here. What's happening here is happening globally. So I think sometimes these things come to a head, and they put the debate firmly, on the front pages and on the airwaves. And I think it's a good debate to have, because again, there's been lots of toing and froing, different opinions. But I think what's coming through loud and clear is that Ireland does need public service broadcasting. We need somewhere to hold, powers that be to account. We need somewhere where we can see ourselves, where we can celebrate the good things, where we can come together and talk about the important, subjects. We had a week on RTE on climate 2 weeks ago, where the nation were really engaged in talking about what they could do to sort of, help the world. And that's important.
But that's stuff, and everybody knows that, and we talked about beforehand, we talked about Brexit coverage and Tony Connolly and what he's brought, and how his journalism has captured people's imaginations, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. But, like you say, that it has emphasised the need for public service broadcasting. A lot of the headlines have been around, and again today, around high earners. This idea of RTE, now it seems to be, faction, as you said, it's a complex organisation. A sub-branch of the NUJ called for a salary cap. Some dispute about that. But the headline around a lot of it is about top earners, and that seems to be how RTE is seen by a lot of people. Like, would you accept that issue, and it's not the issue that will solve your funding crisis, but that issue is something that, for whatever reason, captures people's imagination and lessens their sympathy towards RTE?
Again, I think if you look at it as a fact, and I think I can understand why people feel that some of these people are highly paid, and I think we also have to look at that in the context of what they do. But I think the important piece in all of this is that these people have a dual obligation as well. They have a public service obligation and they have a commercial obligation. Having said that, I have addressed this in the plan, where we're in discussions with our top presenters to take, a 15% pay cut, and that's in discussion, that's ongoing. So we are tackling that, and I think as well, those people have taken, quite a large pay cut over the years. They would take another cut, and I think what this has to be looked at is in perspective of where we are now. I'm taking a pay cut. The executive team are taking a pay cut because I think, given where we are as an organisation, it's the right thing to do.
Do you think if you had a salary cap of 200,000, you would lose those people?
Look, I'm not going to get into caps. I think there is, all of these discussions are individual. All of these people, play a very significant role, actually.
Are they commercially vital to RTE?
Well, I think, again, because we have that dual remit, and, you look at, some organisations, public service broadcasters who have no commercial remit, their content is very different because it's a very singular remit. But I think, you have to have light and shade in a world where you are commercial and you are public broadcasting, and I think they are vital. And I think they are ambassadors for RTE. They work incredibly hard, and they're very cognizant of the role they play and of their position in all of this. So those conversations are ongoing. They are very valuable to us and to the nation, actually, because they're not only sometimes RTE ambassadors, they're seen, certainly around the world as ambassadors for the country as well. But look, as I say, I agree and I admit that people find it, difficult. We have to move on from that because that is not the issue here. The issue is that we have a big job to do. We have to future-proof RTE for the world, for what the world is demanding us to be, which is a provider of great Irish content to audiences wherever they are, whenever they want it. And I think that's the place that we have to get ourselves into, which is we're a linear broadcaster right now, as are many around the world. The audience is voting with its fingertips, if you like, and we are seeing incredible numbers for the player on our online, whether it's on News Now or RTE.ie, and there is real appetite there. So we have to be in that space as well. So that's the North Star, if you like. That's the place we have to get to, and that's now what we have to focus on to make sure we get there.
Did the hostility of the staff then surprise you? You had a meeting with them, which I understand was quite a tense meeting. Did that take you by surprise?
Look, I think, as we said earlier, the birth of this whole strategy was very difficult, and for staff to wake up and see their future in the front pages without them being told is really hard. So again, I can understand the anger, I can understand the upset, I can understand why people felt left down or let down. And as I say, what we've been doing is talking to staff over the last number of weeks to address that and to, I suppose, really to help everybody understand we're in a critical place. We're in a critical place, for many reasons, because yes, the financial side of things is very precarious, but on top of that, so too is the audience side of this, and this is the bit that we have to focus on. We go to work every day to serve the Irish public. That's why we're there. The Irish public expect us to, give them the news, to provide them with entertainment, to challenge, to bring things to light that perhaps would never have otherwise been. So that's what we have to focus on now, because that is the holy grail, if you like.
But no, we'll come on to that and the public service, and I suppose the one thing I'd say, like, there are plenty of people in all forms of journalism, not just in RTE, who feel they're doing those things as well in the same shrinking market where everyone is competing for the same space, which is now predominantly digital. So there is a lot of people who feel the same way. Did you have a follow-up meeting with the staff, or was that cancelled?
We've had several meetings. What we decided to do was, as opposed to have like one big meeting, like we're a big organisation, and we're also in other parts of the country as well. So we thought it best to sort of sit down and have smaller meetings. So that's what's going on. I have one right after this. I had 2 yesterday. So all of us are doing a whole number of those meetings to walk through everything in more detail, and as I say, to get on with it now, and to really engage in how we can change the organisation, change ourselves to ensure that we're providing the best Irish content that's possible for the Irish public.
Does it make it more difficult that you have journalists who are affected by this, who are interrogating you? Like, you had the Brian Dobson interview on the morning of it. Does that make it harder because you are being grilled by people whose job is to interrogate people?
Well, that's their job, and I think the one thing you say about Brian, he's the same with everybody. I don't get an easy pass because it's me, and again, those they're doing their jobs, and that's what they're there to do, and they will continue to do that to the best of their ability. I think what is very, very different, of course, about RTE is that you compare to other organisations. Many organisations in the country are going through difficult times at the moment and going through change. We're doing it in a fishbowl because we are in the public eye, and also we are the national broadcaster. So that is very different, and that is something that maybe some people don't understand. Some people sort of look at RTE and think, why are RTE talking about RTE? But that's the nature of the business. That's the nature of the business we're in. And it's a fact of life. So we have to deal with that. Does it make things difficult at times? Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that we don't progress. It doesn't mean that we don't take the hard decisions. It doesn't mean that we can't move forward, because we have to. And all those people understand that.
Have you taken the hard decisions? Because if I talk to people in RTE, some of the things they'll say is that there are customs and practices, studios, the way studios are run, that area of the business, those studios could be privatised, for example. They could be streamlined in a way that it's never been taken on. Is that a fair criticism? Okay,
so what we are, so again, going back, if I go back, when I came into the organisation first, the first thing I did was just look at how we're structured and really try and understand the best structure to go forward. So the first year really was spent on looking at that and then coming up with a new structure for the organisation. So what we did was we moved away from having like silos of TV, radio and digital, and combine everything under two major areas of content and audiences, channels and marketing. And underneath that, all of the content teams came together. So if you're working in factual, for example, the teams from radio and TV come together. So that was the first piece of work that was done, and it took a while. It takes time to bed in, and we're seeing some great results from that. In the sense that we're looking at subjects now and topics from an audience perspective, and then deciding where we put that content. So that's working, really, really well in some areas, and more obviously to keep on growing. The next piece now we have to look at is how we work. And in bringing teams together, that causes challenges, because if you have worked for radio and now you're working across radio and television, that can bring challenge. So very much at the core of this plan is a fundamental review and a look at how we work. Those discussions will be part of our union negotiations. But I think it's fair to say that, again, as we future-proof our content, we too have to future-proof how we work. And that is as a core to all of this. Those discussions are ongoing. We also built a new studio recently with, very much a view in mind that studio could be rented out for, launches and whatever. And we've actually had some good success in that. So again, if you go back to our studios, we have studios. Some of them are very, very old. They don't look like this, for example. And they're not maybe where people would want to come and always film. But so we have upgraded a studio, and we're hopeful that will bring in some outside business and all of that. So, as I say, core to all of this is changing how we work, to make sure we're more agile, that we're more nimble, and that we do have the ability to be what I would say audience focused first and distribution platform second, so that people can work cross genre and can work cross platform, because that's what it's all about. The audience don't really care in one respect what platform it's on. What they want is the content that they want when they want it. And that's coming through loud and clear. And I'll take a great example. So we worked with Laura Brennan before she passed away. Laura was an incredible campaigner, as you know, and we followed her for the last few weeks of her life because she wanted her story to be seen by everybody. Now that was very much targeted at a younger women audience, and let's say maybe 5 years ago we might have put that show out on RTE1. What we did was we launched it on the player, targeted very directly at a younger audience. It got phenomenal take up on the player. Over 400,000 streams. From a very, very a standing start. Got incredible traction, got incredible debate going in social media platforms among that audience. And then a few weeks later, we put it on RTE1. Right. So that, I think, is a good demonstration of how we are thinking differently.
And how you would be thinking differently in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And there's something on that then, just, the RTE player is something, that people will also have their criticisms about because of how hard it is to actually watch it. Like, that's something when you're trying to get this license fee that isn't collected a lot from younger people who feel we don't have a television. You then have a player that is impossible to watch without going through minutes and minutes of ads. Does that need to adapt?
So with the player, we relaunched it about a year ago, and yeah, look, it's had problems, but we're determined to fix all of that. We have to. And again, I think it's, all of these sort of new technologies, if you like, take a while. They take a while to sort of bottom out. And I suppose the challenge we have is that everyone is used now to, the seamless experience when you go onto a streaming platform. I suppose what we have to make sure we can do is we're streaming live, which a lot of these platforms are not. So people are watching programming live, and that's a huge demand on bandwidth. And also the volumes are really increasing. So the day of the Russia-Ireland rugby match, more people watched online that day than watched on TV. We almost broke the internet in Ireland that day. And, that's what we're coping with here. So we're learning a lot. And again, it's regretful that it's not as good as I'd like it to be. But so we're putting more resource at it. And again, I think what we have to ensure that as an organisation, that we recognising that, in a few years' time, that will be equivalent to maybe some of the big linear broadcasts of today. And in fact, to many audiences, it may be the only one. And that is a shift. That is a big shift for an organisation that has been traditionally, about big broadcast. And, like your organisation, for example, you were born as a digital organisation. Therefore, that's your your very DNA. We're coming at it from the other way. So, I think there's huge will there. There's huge. I suppose, creativity underpinning all of this that allows us to experiment like we could never experiment before. That means we have to get it right. In fact, this week on the player, we launched a new initiative, not a new initiative, but the most recent initiative around Storyland. Now, Storyland is it's a partnership with Screen Northern Ireland, where we work with young writers, young producers, young creatives to bring together new drama. And they launched on the player this week, and they will be watched, all over the country by, a huge range of audiences, and again, getting great feedback on that.
Do you think you haven't managed to convey, because you're doing it now, convey a vision in this plan? Because until I picked this up and listened to you today, everything I've read has been about cutting, two things. We need more money from license fees, and we need to cut. And it was like, what does RTE look like? What is the vision? Do you think you've failed in getting that message across, or have been unable to get it across?
I think it's certainly been a challenge. I think in the noise of everything. It's been there. I've said it. Anyone I've spoken to, I've said it. It's also been at the core of what we've been doing for the last number of years. We're here. RTE's sort of raison d'etre, if you like, is there to captivate Irish audiences and to really cultivate, Irish culture. That hasn't changed. What we have to do and what we're doing now is doing it with more of a digital focus. That I said, when I came in the door, that I said when we launched the strategy a number of years ago, and I'll keep on saying it so people will hear it. Because of course there's a vision for RTE. Of course, you can't run a company without a vision or run an organisation, and for me the vision for the future for RTE, it's a very bright one, but it's a different one. But it's an RTE that is at the heart of Ireland, but is the heart of Ireland how they want it to be. So whether you want to see or hear us on whatever device, we'll be there with you, and we'll be bringing you the conversations that will excite you, will engage you, will captivate you, and that's what it is. So the very being, I suppose, or the very reason we're here hasn't changed. We're here, to provide that public square. We just now have to do it, in different platforms, and also to audiences that are harder to capture, let's say, than they once were. So
when you talk about it, when I heard Moya Doherty on Marion Finucane as well, and even there was a letter from Breda O'Keefe in the Irish Times at the weekend. And it does seem, you talk about the licence fee, you talk about the media disruption. Breda O'Keefe talked about the economic crash, Brexit, digital disruption, broken TV licence system, all these reasons for RTE's situation. What would you say RTE has done wrong?
What have we done wrong? Look, I think that's a big question, and I think maybe in some respects, I think the very nature, because that there is an RTE, I think sometimes we get taken for granted. And, you know, from the outside looking in, sometimes people say, gosh, RTE never gets a pat on the back for doing the good things. It's always the bad things. So have we been perhaps, you know, maybe too laid back in promoting ourselves? Maybe we have. Maybe we have. And again, I think that's something that, you know, media companies the world over, is there a shyness there to talk about ourselves? I think those days are over. You know, we have to be on the front foot on this. We have an awful lot to say. We have an awful lot to give and to bring to the discussion. And I think it's also maybe in a situation where your revenues have both been declining at the pace they have been declining. It's been a lot of firefighting going on. But I think, you know, we've got to firefight, and we've got to be on the front foot.
But costs have risen a lot over those years as well, haven't they?
You know, again, there was a huge reduction in cost for many, many years, and then they've gone slightly up the last couple of years because a number of things. There was a pay restoration agreement after the recession. You know, and let's be honest. You know, rights have gone up. Inflation is there. And again, you know, what we've been doing is try to curtail as much as possible, but try to protect content in this.
And have you tackled the management culture, do you think? There's layers of management is the other thing that you'll hear from people in RTE.
It's you know, the last round of redundancies, and a lot of people left. I think in this round we have to look at it again. And again, this will come out, I think, very much of the way that we need to work going forward. And that's core to all of this. So I think we have to really focus on, you know, on our messaging. We have to tell our story, because quite often it gets told for us. And if we don't take control of that in a stronger fashion, that will happen. But I think what this plan is all about is about putting RTE, you know, on a stable financial path, while we adapt to really address the audience needs. And that is what's underway. It's been underway for a while, but this is I suppose another step in that direction to take cost out, to focus the organisation even more around the audience and on the content we need to create. And we're seeing really good results, actually. And, you know, sometimes, as I say, we don't get the credit for that. But if you look at this autumn, for example, we've had some really concerted efforts around, I suppose, bolstering some of our core content. So you look at the Late, you look at Fair City, two pillars for RTE, you know, for many, many years. You know, both were doing well, but we purposely looked at both and said, okay, what can we inject? You know, what can we do to inject more and newness into both those shows? And a new scriptwriter on Fair City, a new team on the Late. The numbers already are showing that. I think RTE1 is up about 3 share points this autumn. A show last year that we did, Raised by the Village. We had a very sort of a pilot run, Raised by the Village. A lovely, gorgeous show. And we thought, okay, it needs more development. So the team working on it went back to the drawing board, developed it more, you know, stories, the characters, and the results this year were fantastic. I don't know if you saw it, but, you know, a fantastic show that was full of heart and full of community and full of, you know, showing the country, if you like, what happens when you bring two families together from different environments. So there's some really good things happening, and what we have to do, I think, is maybe talk more about that, and also I think our development of younger talent is something that we really have to emphasise more and more. 2FM has been a really good, almost, you know, a fertile ground, if you like, to bring new talent forward. And many of that talent then goes on to other things.
Is 2FM necessary as part of a public service broadcaster?
Well, that's a question that's often asked, and it always strikes me as unusual, because by asking the question, it almost says that is public service only for older people. You know, 2FM is the youngest channel we have. It's the youngest engagement we have with the Irish people. And, you know, 2FM has a very, very important role to play, particularly, I would say, in the Irish music scene. So, for example, yesterday we launched the Choice Music Awards, which is a really fantastic award that goes to up-and-coming Irish talent. We have 2FM Rising, which again every year identifies 10 to 12 up-and-coming Irish bands and singers, and we promote them on 2FM. You know, we have days where it's only Irish music. We get behind, you know, a lot of discussion around what's important to, you know, the younger generation, mental health, LGBTQI rights, etc. So 2FM is a really fertile ground for that discussion, and I think it's vital that in a functioning democracy, in a functioning public service sort of ecosystem, that you have a spread. It's not about just one thing or the other.
Do you think
it has to be a mix?
Is it a? You could argue if it is a functioning democracy, but I wonder if it's too small a democracy, too small a country for RTE to look for the government at this stage to, you know, do what RTE feels it needs to do, and also then fulfil its public service remit as an interrogator of politicians, because we've seen the reports since the strategy was launched about politicians saying, well, we don't care what happens to RTE, and they take their own experiences on RTE personally. So how do you, in a very small country where everybody, you bump into people all the time, you know, it's hard to, how do you emphasize that that thing is important to people to actually take their own criticisms very personally?
Yeah. Well, I think the first of all, the fact that we set up a dual-funded model meant that we recognised at the very foundation of RTE that it needed two funding methods to fund it. You know, I think, and again, you know, in terms of politicians, I think, you know, in the last few weeks, they have come out and said we need public service broadcasting, that we need public service media. I think the debate is how it needs to be funded and what that needs to be sorted out.
They're saying it. There isn't. Do you think people aren't telling them on their doorsteps or in their in constituency clinics, you must do something about RTE. It's an easy thing to
well, that's a question for them, you know, to answer. And again, I've met lots of people the last number of weeks as well. And I think, you know, you look to any country in the world where public service broadcasting is there. Yeah. And every single country has had or is having the debate we're having. And it's been fixed in every country that's had that debate. And it's been fixed in different ways. So you look at the BBC, for example. So, you know, back in 2016, the BBC were told that they have 10 years until the next charter renewal, by which time there has to be, you know, a new method of, you know, collection or of paying for public service broadcasting will have to have come about. So, you know, the UK are involved in a 10-year debate and discussion as to how that will happen. In Italy, for example, they had bigger evasion levels than we had, and it was decided that the public service funding mechanism would get linked to your electricity bill, and overnight it went from, you know, over 20% evasion to 100% compliance. So successful that they brought the number down. So there are solutions to this. There just needs to be proper engagement on it and a reflection that, you know, years and years of doing nothing has left RTE in a place of, you know, almost withering decline. That can't continue, and you know, I don't believe it will continue, because there has to be intervention. So we're working on that, and we'll keep working on it. But I think the notion of it being dual funded has worked very well for the country for many, many years. Now it's time to review it, and it's time to review it as well. And I've said this many times, that I think there is also discussion to be had here. It's not just about RTE, as I mentioned earlier, but about Irish journalism and about Irish creativity, because you know, we're a unique country in that we're sandwiched between two big English-speaking nations, and every day we have, you know, media coming at us from all angles. And if we as a country want to maintain the Irish voice and the Irish journalistic skill that we have, there needs to be proper discussion on that. And I really feel that the time is now. It should have happened 5 years ago, but we need to grasp it now and really ensure that as a country we're backing ourselves and backing the Irish voice and ensuring that we're not going to become mini Manchester or mini
Does RTE
New York.
suffer, though, in comparison with the BBC and television there on the doorstep? So everyone, you know, we talked about Gay Byrne and nobody doubts his genius, but you know, as people mentioned, a lot of the time, for 20 years of the Late Late Show, he had essentially a captive audience where there was two channels, one channel and then two channels. Now you have BBC as a public service broadcaster as well. Does that make it harder for RTE to get the affection of the public, if you like, for them to appreciate what you're doing?
Well, I think, look, the world has changed, and it's a fact of life that we have to deal with it. And you know, I grew up in one channel, RTE land. That's all there was. It doesn't mean, however, that we still can't have or still won't have the impact. What it does mean, however, is that the days of Gay having the conversation and talking to the nation, those days are limited, but it doesn't mean that we don't have the conversations in smaller, as I call them, almost smaller town halls around the country. And that's what we have to do. We have to have many more conversations going on with many more people at the same time. And that's where I think the challenge is for RTE. We have to be in local communities. We have to be, having a TV debate, a radio debate, an online debate. So it's the collective now, as opposed to what once was the big town hall, which Gay would have held effectively for the nation. And also I think another part of the strategy, which we're very excited about, actually, is an area where we're going to bring RTE much more out to the people. So an area around experiences. So we had a very good success with merging, if you like, 2FM and the concert orchestra. So Jenny Green and the concert orchestra brought an orchestra to a younger audience all over the country really successfully.
Does RTE,
we've got to do more of that.
Does RTE need to be more adaptable when you talk about the public service broadcasting and the need for that in a democracy? Like you look at the UK election now, and you look at the bombardment of fake news, the Conservatives changing their Twitter handle to fact check, this stuff that is relentless now, and it's always been there. Politicians have always dissembled and been evasive, but it seems to require a different approach than just being the neutral arbiter in the middle. Is that something that journalism and public service journalism in particular needs to adapt to and be more rigorous about?
Well, I would say public service broadcasting is very rigorous. It's I suppose it's at the core of all journalism, isn't it? To be sure about your facts, and I think if maybe now even more than ever, and it's why we have very, very
but the balance,
strict guidelines around.
Does that help? Balance doesn't really balance between somebody who's lying and somebody who's telling the truth isn't really balance.
But again, I think there has to be, there are occasions when balance is no longer, because the fact is that it's one way or the other. And I think until you get to that point, you have to have that two-way discussion. And I think, the environment is a great example of that, where, it has now been scientifically proven that we need to ensure that we talk about saving the planet rather than the other. So look, I think, the journalistic requirements now are even greater than they ever were before, because, you are... well, first of all, for us, we're that voice, we're that sort of public voice out into the public square, and I think our journalists are rigorous. They're incredibly, they're obviously very well qualified, and the stories need that interrogation. So, that's what it's all about. It's about getting to the truth in many occasions, and it's also about providing quite often the audience with both sides of an argument to say, let the audience decide, and that's again, I think, a very big. Requirement of public service broadcasting on many occasions.
You talked about the Irish voice, and it's you talked about Irish culture in this strategy. And I know this isn't part of the strategy, but I would like to ask you how you might reconcile that with selling the Irish artworks that were bought for but for our RTE bought in the previous years into private collections in the UK. Like, it's hard to reconcile that with the idea of a public service broadcast.
Well, again, as we were saying, there are many facets to what we're doing at the moment, and we have over the years RTE had bought a number of artworks. The fact that we're having to sell the art is, I think, the point here. I don't want to. Well, let's hold on that a second. I don't want to be selling art or selling land. It's sort of quite often put out there as we're selling the family silver, but there's little point having family silver if we haven't got food on the table. And I think what we're trying to do here is be pragmatic around some of these areas. So we decided to put some art for sale, but that money will get reinvested into arts and cultural projects within RTE. So we're not just going to take the money and bank it, and that is about the next generation, if you like, and supporting what's coming. A lot of those artworks, they're beautiful artworks. It doesn't mean that because we're selling some art that we're any less committed to our cultural agenda. In fact, we are probably the biggest supporter of arts and cultural projects around the country through RTE Supporting the Arts. We support about 130, events all over the country.
But does it sadden you on a personal level that, I think you tried to sell them to or get Irish galleries interested, that then it is going, you're in London, you're selling them to private collections possibly, and they're actually being taken out of the Irish public
quite a
life.
few of them are coming back to Ireland.
Are they? But that wasn't part of you didn't make that a stipulation, did
But
you?
it's the buyers were there,
Yeah.
so the buyers happen to be Irish. So.
Okay. What are you most proud of over your time at RTE?
What I'm most proud of, I suppose really I'm hugely proud of the way that that the staff have embraced, I suppose, the shift that's needed to where we want to go. And that's been over the last couple of years. And that people are really, on the front foot looking to serve the audience in the best way possible. Is it challenging right now? Yes, of course it is. But I think people really recognise that RTE cannot stay as it is. That is the majority view within RTE, and people are really embracing that. And people are putting their shoulder to the wheel to ensure that the stories are out there and that we are serving the Irish public. And I think that is hugely important, because without the staff believing that, we wouldn't be there. So that I'm very proud of. I'm also very proud of, I think, a lot of the other initiatives that we have embarked on. So, areas like diversity and inclusion, for example, appointed somebody into that role just over a year ago to really put diversity and inclusion at the heart of everything we do. We have a sustainable strategy that is second to none within RTE. I think we were the first in the public sector to get rid of single-use everything in the canteen, for example. And also, I think what we're also doing, and I think the important thing here is that we're engaging with the public in different ways than we ever have before, and we're getting very good feedback on that. We get inundated with I suppose ideas and stories when we go to the public. When RTE goes out and about, whether it's to the ploughing, whether it's to a festival all together now, we get incredible feedback. It's a two-way feedback, and that's actually what's encouraged us to set up this RTE Experiences to get out more to the public. There's an awful lot to be proud of, and I hope I'll keep being proud.
And you think you'll still be there to see this plan to completion?
I certainly intend to. We have a lot of work to do.
You said you weren't going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. I took this job for many reasons. I suppose the main one being is that I fundamentally believe in public service broadcasting, and I believe in RTE in that place. We have an awful lot to do as an organisation. We have to change. We have to change faster than we have been changing, and we have to bring the public with us. That isn't always easy, because for every person that likes something, somebody else doesn't, and that's also the challenge of public service broadcasting. We have to have light and shade, which means that not everyone will like everything we do, but that's okay. As long as the majority of people are engaging with us in the way they want to engage, and that we're providing the service that they expect from us, then I'm happy.
Dee Forbes, thank you very much.
Thank you.